or play your video games. A few adults in key positions. No, that doesn't work like that. The adults have gone. There's no music. Music now is all digital. I'll do questions at the end. No computer. No mobile phones. No Facebook. Exactly, the worst possible nightmare for children. No more Facebook. No more lighting, no more heating. You'd be living in a cold, dark world. There'd be no more bubbles in your jacuzzi. Unless you want to make them yourselves. But we all know how to do that. And who's going to grow the food? And who's going to put it on lorries and bring it in and stack it in the shelves of the shops? No. Imogen. Imogen is going to feed you all. It would be a very different world. You'd be plunged into a sort of medieval, pre-technological world where you'd be trying to survive on the streets, maybe breaking into shops and houses, trying to find canned food that had been left behind. And you'd be scrabbling for survival. So I thought that's a good starting point for the book. So I came up with the idea that a disease has hit the planet and it only affects people over the age of 14, who are either wiped out instantly or they become essentially zombies. They haven't died and come back to life, but their brains are so rotted and their bodies are so ravaged by this disease that they behave like a classic, slow-moving, relentless, cannibal, flesh-eating zombie. So these kids are out there on the streets armed with spears and swords and clubs or whatever, trying to find any food or water that they can, whilst trying to avoid marauding gangs of grown-ups who are trying to get their hands on the only source of fresh food that is still available to them, which is basically you lot. So lots of kids do get killed and eaten in the books. Rest assured. But I was faced with the same problem when I was writing these books when I started, of how far are you allowed to go if you're writing a horror book for kids? It's a bit like when I started with James Bond, how do I write for kids? But this was slightly more tricky, is how scary am I? There isn't a big rule book that says this is what you can do in a book for kids. You can be this scary and you can kill this number of people. I had to work it out for myself. And the only way I had of doing that, I thought, well, I'll stick with the standard thing, and I read the book out as a bedtime story to my 10-year-old. What's wrong with that? I figured, well, if he could handle it, anyone can. So I started reading it to him. And we got to the first really scary bit in the first chapter. And I was quite nervous. So I was thinking, oh God, you know, what if I really freak him out? What if he doesn't sleep tonight? You know, how am I going to deal with it? And I read it to him, and I looked round and he was just sitting in bed grinning. I said, what, didn't you find that scary? He said, no, it wasn't scary. I liked it a bit when his eyes popped out. But no, that's not scary. So I thought, okay, I can go a bit further on this. So then we got to the next scary bit. I thought, here, it's going to get him this time. Same thing. He's refusing to be scared, and I thought, okay, the challenge is on. I realised you modern kids are a lot harder to scare, a lot harder to gross out than my generation. In my day, we didn't have DVDs. We didn't have computers. You couldn't look at things on YouTube. If you wanted to watch a scary movie, you had to wait till your parents had gone to bed and sneak down in the middle of the night and turn the TV on really quietly and watch it, which in itself was quite scary. But the sort of films we watched were nothing like the sort of stuff that you watch now. You watch those DVDs that you're not supposed to, but I know that you do. And you watch stuff online which you're not supposed to, but we all know that you do. And so, you know, I realised I'm going to have to work a lot harder to frighten modern readers. So I started pushing it and pushing it and pushing it and making these books more and more extreme. They became more violent, more scary, more disturbing, more upsetting, more graphic, until I was about halfway through the book. And I finished reading to my son, I went to bed, and about 4 o'clock in the morning, there was a kind of a banging on the bedroom door, and I woke up and said, what's going on? And he came bursting into the bedroom, covered in sweat, his hair stuck to his face, tears rolling down his cheek, shaking like this, and he could hardly talk and speak to me, but eventually I got it out of him that he'd had this really, really awful nightmare based on the book. And I thought, yes! I finally got the little bastard. So,